Welcome. I'm Jonathan Sweet, the Director of Content and Member Programs at IFAI. So glad you could join us today for our webinar on how to choose the right marine fabric. And today's webinar is sponsored by Sunbrella Marine. Our speakers today are Bill McDaniel, who's the Marine Market Manager at Sunbrella. As a manager for the marine market at Sunbrella, Bill works closely with dedicated marine fabricators and boat enthusiasts to help make their visions come to life. From advising on marine applications to assisting with product development and innovation, Bill plays an integral role in growing the Sunbrella Marine offering. Over his nearly 40-year career, Bill has been an active member in supporting the trade. He is currently on the board of the Marine Accessories and Component Division of the National Marine Manufacturers Association and was previously the president of the Marine Fabricator Association. And he holds the Industrial Fabric Manager IFM certification from IFAI. Bill is a veteran of the United States Navy and holds a BA from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Our second speaker is Mike Erickson, who is the president and owner of Canvas Designers. Mike has an MFC certification. And again, works Canvas Designers Inc., a Riviera Beach, Florida company that produces a diverse line of both interior and exterior canvas and upholstery, along with a complete line of marine metal products. He's also principal of EZ2CY Inc., along with his partner, Mike Varga. EZ2CY Inc. is a Florida company specializing in licensing and manufacturing of the original and first rigid marine enclosure system.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right, thanks for joining us, Mike and Bill. So, getting the right project starts with the right fabric. So how can we help our clients make the right choices? We're going to look at 4 areas today: which fabrics fit which projects, environmental factors, the client's lifestyle, and of course, budget considerations. The way it's going to work is I'm going to talk a little bit into each category, and our 2 great guests are going to share their thoughts on those questions. So first, we're going to talk about which fabrics fit which projects. Those key questions to consider are: what environmental stresses the project will undergo? How well will the fabric perform over time? How flexible must the fabric be? And how easily can it be manipulated to accommodate fasteners and other hardware? So the first category we're going to look at is exterior upholstery. We've got a lot of questions and good things to think about here. We've got to pay close attention to durability, weather resistance, and think about how the clients are going to use the materials. Bill, tell us a little bit more about what we should be thinking about for exterior upholstery.
Well, absolutely. You know, it's several obvious situations and issues that need to come into play, or where, you know, where's the fabric being used? Where's the vessel being used? And what kind of use is it getting, obviously? Is it, you know, is it closer to the equator where the boating season is extended and you have, you know, you typically are exposed 24/7 in a lot of cases? Or is it mid part of the country, northwest, where you have specific issues as far as mold and mildew and things that we'll talk about later? You know, this and a shorter boating season, much like the Northeast or the Midwest, around the Great Lakes area. There's some great boating there, but you know, the times that you can actually use a boat are not the same as it is in Southern Florida. So all those issues need to come into consideration. And with that, you want to, you know, you want to always understand what the client is going to use the boat for, whether it's fishing platform or it's you know, it's having fun with the family. Whatever they're trying to do, you want to understand how they're going to use that product. Are they going to be standing on the helm chair? Are they going to be stepping into the cockpit onto the fabric as they get into the boat? So you want to marry comfort with durability, and with that comes attention to cleanability and wipeability. And we'll talk about this throughout the seminar. There's a huge difference between cleanable and wipeable, and both are important to pay attention to, particularly when you're talking about exterior. So what do you say, Mike?
For us, environmental does play a big role in what we're selecting for fabrics for a client. Our company does a lot of sport fishing boats and then a lot of mega yachts. And in the South Florida environment, UV is a big one. Rain is another one. So if you're going to use an acrylic fabric versus a vinyl, the crew has the ability to just wipe it and dry it off. Whereas once the rain starts to get into a fabric, it can take a little longer to dry. So they're gonna take those things into account. Another aspect of it is fish blood. You know, yes, when you're in a sport fishing boat and you get a nice tuna on, I mean, you got blood everywhere in that cockpit. So that can get on those mezzanine cushions also. So again, a wipe it clean or a hose it clean kind of works in that environment. So I think it depends on if the boat is crew maintained, if the client right after a rain is expecting to come out and sit on those cushions. Color plays into that a little bit, which we'll cover a little bit later. But I think the other aspect is the sun. So if you're gonna, one thing we typically will do is we will move to an acrylic fabric for upholstery if we're gonna do a bright dark color. It's gonna be cooler than a typical vinyl is gonna be in that same dark color. So temperature can play into it. In South Florida and then our other branch in Costa Rica, we've got subtropical and tropical. So that heat can play a big role in what we're recommending, depending on if it's inside the boat or out. In the exterior application, heat can play a big part. The lady of the boat wants to run out, lay down on that sun pad. Well, you know, if she's gonna get fried like bacon, we're done. Okay, so you're not gonna typically put a dark gray vinyl cushion on a sunbed. You're gonna tend to come into something that's gonna give you a little more comfortable temperature range in that area also.
Yeah, and I guess another important factor to look at is what foam choices you make, right? If you're outside and you're using the fabric, you know, a reticulated foam or quick dry foam is, while it might be a bit more stiff, I think you can work around that a little bit, but that's going to allow that fabric application to dry quite a bit faster and to be able to absorb that water and be able to go back to using it once it does rain on it. So, you know, those are issues as well. And, you know, and you mentioned acrylics and blood guts and all that, fish guts and blood. You know, it's also, acrylic can be cleaned with bleach. So virtually, as we talk about cleanable versus wipeable, if it's a vinyl surface, you just wipe that blood off. If blood gets on there, you can use bleach and aggressively clean it. The key is to, outside particularly, be sure to be aware of a performance fabric and performance from the standpoint of UV resistance and cleanability. Those are the two key factors. You can't use regular residential upholstery outside. It's just not going to work.
Oh, you can, but you're going to be replacing it within the first probably 12 months. For our foam selections exterior, we really have two options. It's either going to be a closed cell foam or, like you said, a reticulated foam, a dry fast style foam. We won't use any polyurethane because it's just going to absorb like water, and then it's going to keep those fabrics wet. It's going to create that environment for mildew. So yeah, our two selections exterior would strictly be reticulated and closed cell.
Excellent.
Great. Well, let's head inside the boat. Talk about interior upholstery. We know that the seating, the bedding, these other features are going to be somewhat sheltered from the weather, but of course this isn't a house, this isn't on land, we're in a marine setting. So tell us some of the things we should be considering when choosing fabrics for interior upholstery.
Well, you know, the same performance characteristics that you look for while UV is obviously not too much of an issue inside the boat, cleanability still is going to be. And if you consider that area, of course, it's a smaller, more compact area. So the amount of direct use on the same spot is going to be a percentage way higher than it is, you know, than you would see in your home. And people, which we've talked about, and Michael talked about this as well in his experience, is, you know, people want to take that experience inside the home, move it to the patio, and then transfer that to the boat. And so that's, the styling has picked up quite a bit in the past few years in terms of not just a navy, not just an aqua, not just, people are starting to look for a little bit of design, a little bit of pop, some color inside the craft. And basically, again, the key to all this is going to be performance and cleanability. So Mike,
yeah, what we found, Bill, is cleanability, durability. People come from outside the boat, inside the boat, and they still got their suntan lotions on. And, you've got the sofa area, the dinette area. We also have down in the staterooms or the V-berth area that we could talk a little bit about too. One of the other elements that comes into play from a customer standpoint is the feel and look. It's that style. Especially on boats today, it seems like that all the housing fashion is sort of moving towards the boats, and they have the same kind of colors and feel that they like in their house. They kind of apply it to the boat. So we typically get in an interview with a customer and kind of get an idea of the style, whether it's modern or whether it's classic, whatever they're looking for. And then we work with them in selecting and recommending fabrics. We have moved, 20 years ago, we were putting cottons on bedding and stuff. We've kind of moved away from that with the acrylics. And, the smaller the boat, I will say, the more harsh the interior is, because you just, the door is closer to everything, and, they might not have air conditioning as you get up north. So you run into a lot of moisture and humidity issues too. And with an acrylic, you tend to not have them absorbing the fiber, where the old cotton got kind of pretty stiff and kind of stayed moist all the time, especially down here in the tropics. So we've added a lot of acrylics where we've replaced it with the traditional home furnishing stuff like polyesters and cottons, just because fashion has really been applied. Acrylics sort of evolved with the patio furniture business, but they're obviously designed to go inside of boats. And now you see lots of promotions on acrylics going inside of homes too. So the products have evolved, the selection has evolved, and that fashion statement can be made with an acrylic now, instead of traditionally the old printed cottons or some of the woven polyesters. We've replaced pretty much everything. Everything that goes on a boat inside and out is now, we have a good selection that will work in that environment much better than traditional stuff has been in the past. One of the things in seating areas inside is feel. It's look, but it's also feel. And one of the most popular products inside for us on these sport fishermen and mega yachts is Ultra Leather. Ultra Leather has that fine hand. It feels like a kid glove Italian leather, but it comes 54 inches wide, and we don't have to work around legs and tails. I think that, and now Sombrella's come out with a Horizon product. We're starting to use the Horizon product inside also. It's not just for the exterior upholstery, but we're finding we're using it a lot. I just finished a headliner on a 38 Bertram, and I've got a full sailboat. We're doing the headliner in the Horizon textile, because it gives you a little different look. It gives you that soft but linen sort of texture effect, and it really does change the whole look of the inside of the boat with it. So, we tend to get outside the box. You know that, Bill. I'm calling you up constantly to say, hey, can I use it here? It's with those new textures, it really adds another selection and a whole nother level of complementing things inside also.
Yeah, and there's one other thing when we talk about that difference between using a cellulosic fiber such as cotton or some natural fiber inside the boat. You're still in the water, you're in a moist environment, and no matter virtually anything you can do is going to stop that. So it's going to be there. And those products that have a high degree of cottons and linens and things in them have a tendency to absorb that moisture, water, and smells. It's going to have that odor that's going to be there. Synthetic fibers, acrylic polyesters, have a good tendency to not do that, to not absorb those in the same way. So, you know, it creates a bit better environment. And yeah, you know, the thing about, well, really about most vinyl type products today, but particularly Horizon, is GreenGuard certified. So, you know, that product is usable inside or outside the boat without any health issues to be concerned with. And, you know, we're talking about mega yachts and yachts, but they're also in the Great Lakes. There are plenty of boats, cabin cruisers, and large vessels, obviously, that have the same requirement in terms of, you know, the amount of use that it gets, you know, what as we go back to those terms, durability, cleanability, that are just important there as they are in a, you know, a saltwater environment. So yeah, it's again, the thing I see at all the consumer shows we go to and other boating events, yeah, boaters are starting to really personalize these things, and it starts to look like a floating den in a home. So yeah, really nice.
Well, we all know that shade, sun protection is a big deal on our boats. So when we're talking about those types of projects, our Benamis and other shade, what are some of the things we need to be thinking about there? We know we've got direct, we've got continual exposure to the sun. We need to protect from UV rays. What are some of the other factors we need to be thinking about with those types of projects?
Yeah, actually, you know, I still run. In fact, this week had a conversation that you know, a person wanted to use a furniture fabric as an awning fabric. Well, you know, that you just can't do that. It's not fit for purpose. It's not fit for use, and that's a key term. That's something that, you know, that we need to be aware of, is what if the product is fit for application. Years ago, and it wasn't really that long ago, you know, what we had was dyed canvas products that built Bimini tops out of, and you know, that's what we had. Covers, everything, it worked fine. Colors did okay. It lasted fairly well out in exposure because it was loaded down with heavy metals and the dye stuff, which actually protected that cotton and even polycotton fiber. Of course, EPA came along and said, you're killing all the good stuff by dumping this, all the good bacteria. So we're taking that out of there. And once that happened, a new solution had to come. We had to come up with something different as an industry that was going to withstand the rigors of UV exposure. And, you know, two really good products in there, well, three categories of products in there are, I want to say, acrylic. Acrylic has a very adept ability to take that heat energy of UVA, UVB exposure and disperse it along the axis of the fiber. So what it does in essence, and that's a simplified way to talk about a little bit of a complicated issue, but what that does is it does not allow the heat energy to sit and dwell within the fabric very long within the fiber. It moves it along the axis, and what that does is extends the life, you know, of the product. It can withstand those elements, among other things. Polyester, solution dyed polyester, particularly heavy coated polyesters that have unique specific outdoor use UV resistant coatings can go, you know, it can really extend the life of the product. Polyester in and of itself as a polymer class of polymers simply doesn't have the same ability to off-gas to offset that heat energy as efficiently as, say, an acrylic can. And then you have products like Stamoid with some specialized coatings and properties that do make it a great purpose for outside. Mike will talk about where he uses those and the reasons why, and you know, all the things involved with that. But when you look at that, back to the question of, can I use the furniture fabric for my awning or for a Bimini top? Well, the answer is no. If you look at this Bimini top, obviously, as we all know, the fabric has to support itself between those spans of bows. And so the fabric has to be constructed differently and it has to be finished differently. And by that, it means that you're more concerned with water repellency here than you are with soil release. In the furniture fabric, what we're more concerned with is soil release. And if you consider the furniture fabric itself, it gets wrapped around the cushion. And what we want to do is produce an area that will be comfortable to sit on, that's breathable and is easy to clean. And that's the goal. That's the point that we're trying to get to by building a furniture product versus an awning or a Bimini top product. And then, of course, and we'll talk about this later, but there's a difference between obviously water repellent and waterproof. But essentially, those are the things that we as suppliers look at and say, how can we answer these questions? And there are a lot of good products out there, Mike. How do you deal with this?
Well, for, again, being in South Florida, we've got some elements that we have to play with that can be a little unique compared to some of the rest of the country. One of them being tropical rain. When it's a big event when y'all get an inch of rain. Well, when we start getting 5 and 6 inches is when we start calling it a big event. It comes down pretty hard when it comes down. With that sort of gets involved with the aspects of water repellency versus waterproof. The other element that we take into account in a Bimini application is scale. If you look at a Bimini on a 20-foot lake or river boat, it's 6 or 8 feet long and 8 feet wide, and it works quite well. And you start talking about 112-foot Westport, now you're into 20-foot beams and 20-foot lengths, and you're into 1.5 inch stainless steel frames instead of 7/8 inch, and you're into welded aluminum frames or stretched over metal frames that aren't traditional Biminis, a lace on top or that type of thing. And with that, you've got to talk about stability and span, as you mentioned earlier. With span, if you're spanning 36 up to 48 inches, it's not too much of an issue. But when you start getting 5 and 6 feet between bows and 18-foot beams, you start to deal with the properties of the fabrics. And that's where some of the differences between the fibers of polyester and the fibers of acrylic come into play on stability. A stamoid product, while it's limiting in colors, it sort of plays a big role in our very large tops. When we get into super spans that are a little bit out of norm, we're going to tend to go towards that polyester sailcloth coated product because of the stability of stretch and contraction in that product across a large span. When it comes to colors, there are other options too. I mean, with Sunbrella or an acrylic, you have the ability to pick a lot of darker colors that aren't going to fade out, where in vinyls, they're going to tend to not hold up as well. With those products, we're going to move them towards an acrylic. And if we're in the tropics and it's overhead in a Bimini top up on a fly bridge of a trawler or something, we're typically going to go into either Sunbrella Plus or what's your other product? I don't use it that much.
Sea-Mark. Yeah, Sea-Mark.
Yeah, Sea-Mark. Sunbrella Plus or a Sea-Mark type product where it's got another coating on it on the underside that's going to give you more waterproofness than just water repellency. Because in a heavy tropical storm, if it's a fairly large span, you can get some mist through. So there's some options out there that allow you to select something that's going to apply better in those situations. So again, it's sort of, for us, it's about color, and that limits the factor in it. Or it might be about the span and what we're dealing with for torrential rain. So again, I think there's a lot of really good products out there. I think The selection is far better than the old days of Vivitex. And you know, cotton polys and that type of stuff. I think that across the board for our Bimini top selection, we've got 3 or 4 options and 4 or 5 manufacturers as options on it. You can even get into a vinyl laminate if you're not dealing with a flutter or a floating top. If it's going to be on a structure that's all welded up and it's going to be laced onto it or tension tight, even a vinyl laminate can work well in some of these applications.
Sure. And, you know, we can't forget a hugely growing segment of the shade business is, you referred to it as sunflies and sunshades and aft or forward covers where you're on the hook and want to have some fun, you know, shade while the kids are swimming or whatever it may be. You know, those are easy up, easy down, quick install, quick, quick takedown, and you know, the idea being, you know, to really address the issue of UV exposure, and that's becoming more and more important. People are more and more aware of it, and you know, that's just a growing. You can use certainly you can use a Sunbrella, you can use a polyester knit fabric. There's several options out there, but you know, it's all of the products that are available today, particularly if they're rated for outside, you know, have some really unique characteristics and purpose for use. And I keep wanting to fit for use issue. If you're in the South 24/7, kind of like Mike is, polyester is going to have a difficult time lasting as long as an acrylic will in 24/7 exposure. You know, if you're in the Great Lakes or you're in some other part of the country, Pacific Northwest, I would even include that difficult climate to be the Southwest, Arizona, and all that. It's just a dry heat, but those are also considerations to take into mind when you're building these units.
Well, some great information there on our shade solutions. And another thing we touched on, of course, was water repellency and waterproof. And an area where that's especially important is our boat covers. So tell us a little bit about what you should be thinking about when you're coming up with fabricating a boat cover for your clients.
Yeah, let's click to the next slide, I believe. Okay, well, all right, this one works. Yeah, you know, a distinct difference, and this still gets confusing out there a little bit. I still run into whether it's consumers or even in some cases, probably more new to the industry fabricators that equate water repellent and waterproof on the same level, and they're not. Water repellent fabrics are just that. They repel water. They have it's a dip surface tension finish. And that basically is what it's going to do is it's not going to allow the water molecule, the surface tension of the water molecule to break down. So if you consider spiders walking on water, that's kind of what's happening. They're not breaking that surface tension so they can scoot across the top of the water. That's much of the situation we're creating here, where the water doesn't have an option to cling to the fabric. The only option is to run off. It breathes, but it can literally rain hard enough to force moisture through the fabric. And while we're able to do remarkable things with the technology and fibers today, longevity and all those things that go along with that, you know, the one thing is kind of like waxing a boat or whatever. Periodically, those finishes are going to need to be replenished because they just don't last. The sun gets after that first, so to speak. So waterproofness is simply closing the holes up. You know, just basically we spread a layer of something, whether it's a laminate or a extruded laminate or a coating like a Sunbrella Plus, or the coating that goes on to, say, a Surelast type product. And what that does is close the holes up and certainly retards the ability for water to come through. So those are things that you need to be really concerned with. If you're going to make a cover out of something that's waterproof, it needs to be vented, whether it's because of a change in humidity and condensate in the boat, or just snow loads that began to melt and find their way into the boat, whatever it might be. You want to be able to keep that boat as dry as possible. Mike,
Yeah, I'd like to add a few things to it. You know, a boat cover, also what exists in this whole category is just plain covers, whether it's a snap-on cockpit cover, a helm cover, a center console cover, you know, up to the mega yachts where you're dealing with a 20-foot long curvy settee cover that goes on over the cushions so that if, you know, if the Lord brings down a little bit of rain, none of the cushions get wet. The crew is out there 24/7 taking the covers on and taking them off. Fabric selection can play a pretty big part in that. We tend to, on the smaller covers, on the smaller boats, they tend to want a color. Again, I come back to this color because that sort of becomes one of the first things we decide. You know, if they're into any kind of a color other than white, then we know where we're taking them, and that's towards the acrylics. Sometimes towards the polyesters. If they're wanting white or off-white to match and not accent anything, then we're definitely moving to the Stamwade products. It doesn't play as much in the color selection for repellency versus waterproof for us. The dominant factor for us starts out as color. You get on these large mega yachts and they want white, or maybe once in an odd while they'll go for a light gray. So we're going to tend to be in the Stamwades and waterproof products. And then keep in mind, 24-hour crew on there. I mean, these boats can have as many as 20 crew on the boat. They're going to be taking the covers on and off all the time. So you're not going to have a cover sit there that's waterproof, not breathable, and build this really bad environment on it, because it typically is going to get taken off every day and put on every day. So they're going to tend to air it out. If it's going to be a cover that's going to be more long-term, if we're going waterproof, then we start to look at mechanical vent capabilities, building some airflow under the cover, that type of thing. One of the other things we do a lot of is sort of a new arena to a certain degree, and that's these large center console boats. And we're doing full covers up over the T-top, down over the whole hull side, down to the waterline. I mean, 100-yard cover is not unusual on some of these, you know, 53 HCBs, 63 HCBs, 46 Valhallas, 41 Bahamas. I mean, these boats are getting very large. So with these full covers, one, the cover has to go on a boat lift most of the time. So we start to look for really lightweight options, which has moved us over to a Surelast or a WeatherMax type product on these large covers, because one, you get a little more chafe resistance with polyester versus acrylic, so you don't have to put as many reinforcement patches on. You can get into the lightweight product, so you can cut some weight out of that. So again, if it's going to be a white, very large center console boat cover, we're going to be into the white vinyl coated polyester lightweight fabrics. If it's going to be a heavy, or if it's going to be a heavier product and they want color, we're going to go into the WeatherMax lights and those types of products. If it's still a small enough scale where it's not just going to be a 100-pound boat cover, then we're still into the Sombrellas because of the long-term performance you get out of the fibers. But color plays a big role in what we're using on covers. Chafe resistance comes into play. And the industry has a wide selection. If you're not down in the South, I mean, you can get into the acrylic coated polyesters, the Top Guns of this world even, and they make a great cover. Again, different regions of the country. You get out in the dry heats of Arizona or the wet moistures of Seattle, the cold climate, and for that matter, snow loads anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line. I don't have to deal with that. But, you know, I decorate my palm trees for Christmas. But you know, these other regions, some of these other elements are going to play into that. So you're going to have to design a full boat cover that takes a snow load during the winter up north. That'll tend to get you into structures and might change some of the fabric elements that you want to, you know, select from. So across the board, regional aspects play into it quite extensively. So do colors, so do looks, so do chafe resistance. I mean, that kind of covers the gambit of it. And again, breathability and, you know, waterproof versus water repellency can play into those same issues depending on what the applications are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, that speaks to fit for purpose when polyester has that ability to span a large area in a lighter weight. And pontoon boats, for instance, you know, the playpen covers, that's an ideal place for polyester to be, you know, regardless of where the boat is. It's just because one person can generally handle that. One of the things that we need to point out about durability and longevity comes down to lifespan of the products. And I mentioned earlier about the efficiency and effectiveness of moving that heat energy along to slow down decomposition of the polymer. Basically, on, you know, out of the gate, polyesters are going to be a stronger fiber. Within the first year into the second year, they begin to lose, particularly 24/7. Now, if it goes into the storage unit every day, stays there most of the time, obviously there are exceptions to this. But when we're talking about, you know, apples and apples, 24/7 exposure in most areas, polyesters are going to start to lose their strength in the first year and drop off fairly dramatically after that, where acrylic products tend, because of that efficiency of moving that energy along, tend to last longer. So, you know, you're going to have as much as 80 to 85% of the original strength at the end of the life. The color might be impacted depending on the depth of color, but that's something, you know, that just needs to be made aware depending on where you're boating, what your clientele is. So that's something to always consider as well.
That's really going to set us up for our next section of the webinar. We're talking about the environmental factors. We, of course, need to know where and when the clients are going to be boating. So is it saltwater, freshwater, sun, is there wind? All sorts of factors to consider. But first, guys, why don't we go ahead and talk about saltwater versus freshwater? Obviously, big difference there, and we know that it can make a big impact on your fabric as well as your other components of your boat.
Yeah, sure. You know, saltwater obviously is an environment that has all its own ecoclimate out there. There's a lot of things going on with seagulls and, you know, other critters that you'll find on the water. You know, as far as and Michael touched a little more in depth about how he approaches these things, but you know, while freshwater's less harsh, it can have its own set of issues. And one of the things, regardless of where you are, that's always going to be something that we'll just talk about with the consumer, with you guys, everything, is mold and mildew. Mold and mildew is actually, it's a microorganism. It's a living thing, obviously. And basically, of today's fibers that are out there, the synthetic fibers does not provide an environment for mold and mildew to grow. It can't grow. It can't grow on the fiber. It can't grow on the fabric. What it grows on is what gets onto the fabric. So that could be particulate pollen. It could be anything that precipitates out of the air. It could be cooking in the galley, and that steam, it rises up, brings particles with it. Grabbing it with your hands, even suntan lotion to some degree, spilling mustard and not cleaning it up possibly, or whatever the case may be. If it has an environment to grow in, mold and mildew is going to grow. One thing that happens is bleach impervious fabrics are just that. They're bleach impervious, and really one of the fastest, most economical ways to kill mold is to have a mixture of bleach and a mild detergent like Dawn dishwashing detergent mixed into water. the fabric is not affected by it. What you have to be concerned with is everything that's around that fabric, the glass, what it may be sewn with. If it don't use PTF thread or or whatever it might be, you need to be concerned about that. But that's why we recommend diluting the mixture. You could use 100% bleach on acrylics. Polyesters are a little bit more difficult. Have to be careful with that. Can't really use bleach. So those are things that certainly come into play. But as far as making choices, Mike, how do you approach that as far as what to do with saltwater versus freshwater?
Well, I'm originally from Minnesota, so I know what freshwater is for sure. But 40 years down in South Florida, you kind of on the coast, you find out real quick what saltwater's all about. And then you turn around and decide you're going to someday maybe retire part-time in Costa Rica. So you go even further south and you find out that it is more extreme even than what's here. Saltwater, freshwater. Saltwater is massively more corrosive than saltwater, obviously. You can, if you're going looking for a new boat or a used boat, you go looking for the freshwater boat because saltwater just tears them up, especially the metals. While we're talking about, fabrics here, all these fabrics are synthetics. Cleaning them, almost everyone's going to recommend the bleach scenario to go along with the Dawn. There's mild soaps. When you start talking about saltwater, you have to really sort of teach along the way, and you want to make sure that you teach them how to maintain their finished product that you just made for them. Or you're going to get the call going, I don't understand, I got mold underneath my bimini. Well, there's a spot that very few people rinse off. Okay, they rinse off the top of the top, but whether you got the full enclosure on it or not, that whole wagon effect of a bimini top brings all of those elements, the dirt and everything else in, and it attaches underneath to the fabric. And then you get yourself in that dark scenario. It's shading the mildew so it can grow. We do a pretty extensive show and tell about maintaining the finished product. So scrubbing and washing, not just rinsing off, is a good thing to do with fabrics, whatever they may be on the outside. Even that boat cover, they tend to rinse off the outside of the boat cover, but they never wash the underside of it. Well, then you start to create that dirt element that gives them the food that allows them nice little mildews to grow all over the place. So we do a pretty extensive thing about maintenance that helps prevent a lot of this. When it comes to saltwater versus freshwater, one of the key things is the metal. And let's face it, we're talking about fabrics today, but metal plays a component in every single fabric thing we make, whether it's a metal slider on a cushion versus a plastic one, or whether it's, are you using aluminum, or, back in the old days of vinyl coated, galvanized steel pipes for biminis. Those are pretty much gone, but obviously stainless steel is designed to hold up better in that saltwater environment than what, say, aluminum is. And 316L stainless steel is going to tend to hold up better than 304. You're going to get some surface rust in an environment that isn't maintained and waxed all the time. And then you talk about your fasteners. Every cover's got a snap or a drawstring or a webbing strap with a little cinch of something, and most of them have a metal piece in them. So you start to lean towards plastics, but then UV can get to those, or metals, and just make sure the content it's a high quality stainless steel if you're dealing with that. The other aspect that plays into it is the fact that salt water gets up and sits on a cushion. So you rinse it off. It takes a lot more to rinse it off than to rinse and wipe. So that's where I'm thrilled with the Horizon product, just because I've got that wipeable product now that actually gives me that same performance I'm looking for in that environment. So across the board, saltwater plays a pretty big role in the corrosiveness of things, along with UV. Since we're covering the saltwater right now, both of them are the canvas man's friend, if you ask me. They're the consumer's nightmare, but they're the canvas man's friend. You know, with South Florida, it's a new cover every 5 to 7 years. And it's just due to that saltwater UV harsh environment scenario that we put ourselves in.
Yeah,
Mike,
and you know, one other thing key to all that is when we talk about doing a heavy cleaning, regardless, as long as when we're talking about particularly a breathable fabric, always go through that regimen of retreating it, regardless of, you know, if you've done a heavy cleaning, it involves bleach, go back with a 303 type or a synthetic water repellent treatment for synthetics, not for cottons, and retreat that thing.
One, I'd like to
The customer's gonna have.
Yeah, I'd like to say one more thing on that. I forgot. Also, water repellency is the canvas man's friend. Okay. And I say that because every 2 to 3 years in the tropics down here anyway, they scrub it enough. It's out in that same harsh environment we've been talking about. It's going to wear off. And I love selling them some more water repellency. I don't even have to make it. I get to pull it right off the shelf and hand it to them and take their money. It's a wonderful deal.
Well, guys, I want to make sure we keep moving along, and we've already talked a lot about temperature and heavy sun as environmental factors, but is there anything you'd like to add that we should be thinking about with our fabric choices with heat and temperature changes, as well as, of course, the heavy sunlight?
Yeah, you know, certainly more rigid climates for lower temperatures are going to be concerned with cold cracks. Something at least 20 below is always a good thing. You know, we're seeing a lot of applications now where, for comfort's sake, and to get that greater degree of durability and abrasion resistance, people will put a fabric insert into the back and the seat of the cushion, and then the rub rail will be out of a vinyl type or Horizon type product or around the back. And you know, those are things that can help, you know, extend the experience, make it a little bit better for them. And that's true whether it's huge yachts or it's a pontoon on the local lake. Mike, how do you guys look at that?
Well, we do have to take this into account in our selections, especially when we're talking about the sun aspects of it, and even the torrential humidity and the torrential rains and stuff. Is our boats, a lot of them, you know, while we do a fair share local, a lot of them are down here for the winter, and then they're, you know, in Martha's Vineyard or New York or Long Island for the summer. So in those spring and fall elements in the summer, or in up north, what you can have is a big temperature difference. So we'll ask them if the boat's going to stay here all the time or if it's going to go north, especially like for enclosures. If we're dealing with clear vinyls, the soft type enclosures rather than the rigid. One of the positives of rigid enclosures like our Easy 2CY product is the fact that it doesn't really change dimensionally with temperature. On the other hand, you start to deal with roll vinyls and some of these thicker vinyls and the pressed polish stuff, you're going to have a big change in what I want to say, big change in the size of a panel from, you know, 20 degrees below zero to, you know, 90 or 100 degrees most year round down here. So if a boat's going to go north, we're going to have that question first of all, and then we're going to have the discussion of, you know, whether we should be thinning out the vinyl into a 30 mil pressed polish so that it's not going to be so stiff or contract so much if it's going to go north and get used in those two other, extreme spring and fall temperature changes. So the north-south thing definitely is something we deal with on an everyday basis. And obviously, the further south you get, the more UV intensity, and we've kind of covered that enough, I think. But those factors all play into it for sure.
Deal.
Definitely. And of course, we want to talk about not only where they're using it, but how they use it. So the client's lifestyle is, of course, going to play a big part in what we recommend for fabric choices. We're going to want to learn about what their tastes are, how they plan to use the boat. One big category, of course, is what kind of traffic, and then do they have kids and pets? We all know those present some, as someone who has a pet and kids, we know those present unique challenges. So some thoughts on how you can prepare your clients for those.
Yeah, the fur babies are always something that we want to keep around us there, whether it's a cat or a dog. And I haven't seen too many cats on boats. I guess they're there, but at any rate, yeah, one of the things to be conscious of when you're choosing, particularly a woven fabric, is in that design. If you have a dog and you have a pattern that's highly stylized, has a lot of floats in it, in that smaller area, you might want to consider, how that animal is going to interact with it. Particularly, is it going to snag and pull that up and pull those floats and create aesthetic issues? Maybe a more tightly woven flat fabric application is best. Even vinyls have a bit of a difficulty with pets as well. Pets are just a special category of awesome, but in a lot of different ways. But anyway, that's something that needs to be addressed. And certainly kids are going to be kids, and they're going to, they're on the water, they're vacationing, they're having fun, they're out playing, and, the pizza, everything's going to fly. And so, you just need to be aware that you can either thoroughly wipe or you can thoroughly clean whatever product you have there, whatever condition, whatever gets onto it. So those are things. High traffic areas are difficult. The wear is going to show fairly quickly. But again, color retention, inside or outside, cleanability, those are key things, Mike.
I agree with you 100%. Some of the other aspects of that sort of play into this same element is, for instance, you might be getting on your boat from the same dock, from the same spot every day, and you just grab onto this canvas product. It might be a Dodge or a Bimini. Over time, all those oils get on it. So it's not just the pets making it dirty, but with that, a lot of times we'll put a wipeable product as a reinforcement in those grab areas on a Dodger. It might be leather, or it might be a vinyl, like Horizon actually, that we'll put on those areas where they're constantly got a high traffic type scenario. A lot of these mega yachts, when the clients aren't there, or even when they are there, they'll take this beautiful carpet that they have on their floors, and then they'll turn around and they'll call up the canvas guy, and we'll make runners for the high traffic area so that doesn't soil the carpet. We typically use Sunbrella there because you're putting a fabric right against another textile, and you definitely don't want you want the breathability aspect, but you want the good repellency for that red wine too. I think that the animal aspect, you tend to stay away from textiles because the hair grabs them more. You'll tend to lean towards faux leathers, or a vinyl type product, or a urethane type product for those just because it'll be more durable and last a little bit longer.
Okay.
How about those aesthetic considerations? How do you try to take that into account when you're making your decisions?
Yeah, we'd mentioned earlier, and it is a very much a trend, and one I'm glad to see, the transition of the home environment to the outside, to the boat, to the patio, to the boat. And it's patterns are starting to come in there. I mean, we talk widely about hate stripes and those those confined spaces. When you do it right, it looks awesome. But it's a bear to get done. And you know, just a non-directional pattern is best. It just doesn't collect the eye and create a, you know, a vision issue when you walk into the boat. And pops of color are becoming more and more, particularly, you know, not so much in the OEM builder community. They're still kind of stayed that they're, you know, they're traditional. They're, you know, we're seeing some signs of movement, but it's still very much neutrals and grays and blacks and navies. But you know, in the aftermarket, people are really starting to stylize it in their own taste. Is that what you see, Mike?
Yeah, one of the things, you know, we see most everything in a boat, because it's a confined space, unless you get up on these just what I call stupid money boats. Okay. But if you're looking at sort of a traditional sport fish or smaller, they're confined spaces, so they're going to tend to use a lot of neutrals in all of the backgrounds. So the walls, the overhead, even the carpets, you're not going to see a lot of dark colors. And then where they're going to get their pop tends to be in a pillow or an accent area, or you know, the pillow on the center of the bed, but the bedspread is all white. Those types of things. Textures come into play a lot, and you know, in recent times, what you're seeing on a lot of this stuff, you've seen some of the Bentley stitching. Well, this stitching pattern adds an element of texture to it. Up until really the Horizon Textile, you didn't see a lot of texture. You had 1 or 2 or 3 embosses on a vinyl, and that was all that was out there. It's kind of changed the game some, and we're starting to use a lot more elements of texture. Even the acrylics, let's face it, back when I first got started, there were 5 colors of Sunbrella, and you know, they were all the same weave, and you know, you put them on awnings or you put them on biminis, it didn't matter. That has changed over the years and evolved into way too many SKUs, but hey, we'll live with it. What has happened is now you're starting to see with the jackards, you see a lot more knobbies, you'll see some chenilles that are in acrylics, where traditionally it was just Sunbrella furniture fabric and it was all one weave and that's what it was, and it had color choices and a few patterns. Now you've gotten into a textural effect that takes place on a lot of these acrylics too, which comes same from that fashion industry in the home and on the boat. But you got a lot more selections from that. When it comes to lifestyle also, you know, everybody has their home and they sort of have their feel and they know what they're doing. They want to bring that in. So you got to spend some time as a fabricator really sort of questioning and trying to get an idea of their lifestyle, how they're going to use things, of their flavor. And you can do that honestly by just having a bunch of pictures of even brand new boats. You know, it's many times we'll get, I seen this boat at the boat show and this is what I want. So then you got to try and figure out what boat they seen, and you know, so hopefully, you know, the internet helps a lot in coordinating these types of things. But I think that you know, aesthetics, you know, I mentioned on the interiors, the faux leathers, that feel. Well, now you can kind of bring that faux leather outside where it actually is still going to perform, because the faux leathers they tried to bring outside really didn't perform very well. In like the Horizon product, I mean, it's got a not a hot and sticky feel. It's got that matte feel. It's very supple, so it gives you that sort of faux leather attempt you're after for outside also. So a lot of selections, a lot of choices. You just got to spend a little bit of investment time with that client, understanding what their lifestyle is, so that you can direct them towards what they're going to like. Because if they like what you're proposing, they're going to buy it. And let's face it, there's the goal.
Right. So we are just about out of time, but I do want to give you guys a chance to talk about meeting those budget expectations. So if we can just spend a couple minutes talking about how you navigate those discussions and how you, you know, explore those different price points. with your clients?
Yeah, you know, it's obviously it's picking the right fabric for the right application, the right end use, what their expectation is. From our standpoint on the supply side, as we try to, you know, to develop those products that are going to cover a variety of different applications and needs and wants. But Mike has much more experience at actually talking to the consumer once you decide that you're going to separate them from their money. So how does that go, Mike?
You know, I wish clients would understand I'm not trying to spend their budget, but I wish they'd give me a budget. I hate to go through the whole process and then get down to the end and then watch their jaw drop when I give them the price. And all through that process, if we could be talking about budget along the way or have a clue as to what they're willing or wanting to spend to get the best bang for their buck, I'd be able to do my job a lot better for them than dropping their jaw at the end of the conversation. For instance, you know, their boat plays into it. If you've got a little 16-foot aluminum river boat or lake boat, fishing boat, gosh knows I'm not going to propose a $200 a yard full leather on their cushions. So budget plays a big part in the selection. I haven't quite figured it out. I just come right out and say, do you have a budget for, you know, what you want to spend on, say, this 50-foot sport fisherman to redo the whole interior? Because there's ways to go about it that really do affect the dollars. They can still get the bang, and I can get them a lot more bang if I get an idea from a budget number. I just haven't, you know, it's kind of like teeth. I haven't figured out how to pull that out of them yet.
All right.
It's always good to set that expectation up front so that they at least have an idea of what you're going to use, where you're going to go, and kind of ballpark you're going to be in. So
Yep.
hopefully you don't keep them from falling out and passing out. So I think that's, yeah.
Well, Bill and Mike, thank you so much for being part of this today. And of course, I want to thank the audience for spending the hour with us, and we hope you've learned something and enjoyed today's webinar. If you'd like to learn more about this subject, be sure to check out How to Choose the Right Marine Fabric, which is an IFAI white paper coming later this month, sponsored by Sunbrella. You'll be able to find links to it on the Marine Fabricator website and IFAI. Those addresses right there on your screen. Plus, we'll be sending out an email when it is available for download. And this presentation has also been recorded, and you will soon get an email with a link to that recording as well. So once again, thank you, Bill and Mike. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just keep the hull wet and the deck dry. That's, you know, best you can do. It's
About all I can say is say what you're gonna say to the customer, do what you say you're gonna do it for the price you tell them you're gonna do it, and do it on time, and you'll be successful.
All right. Well, thanks very much, and thanks everyone for being part of the webinar. Have a nice day.